The day America united, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Well, you young folks have no idea what it was like before the great iron road stretched across this vast country. You hop on a train now, and it's just a few days, you're from the coast to coast, just like that. But back in my day, before the rail was laid, crossing the country was a perilous, month-long journey filled with danger, hardship, and death. But on May 10th, 1869, everything changed. I was there, standing on Promontory Summit, Utah, with the golden spike was driven into the last tie, marking the completion of the first Transcontinental Railroad. And let me tell you, it was a sight I'll never forget. Now, before I get into that day, let me take you back a little so you can understand just how important this was. Before the railroad, getting across this country was nearly impossible. If you were bold enough to take the overland route by wagon, you were looking at a 5 or 6 month trek across treacherous mountains, blistering deserts, and lawless territory. Many folks died along the way, if not from accidents or disease, then from outlaws or hostile attacks, kind of like that game you used to play in school, Oregon Trail. For those who had the money, the alternative was to sail the Horn of South America, a voyage that took 6 months or more, and then take a ship to Panama, then cross the feverish-ridden jungle before catching another ship up the Pacific coast. Either way, it was expensive, slow, and dangerous. We were one nation, but in truth, we were divided. The East and West might as well have been separate worlds. That's when the idea of a transcontinental railroad took hold. A dream to stitch this country together with iron and steam, but making it happen, well, that was going to be a real damn battle. The job of building this railroad was given to two companies, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific. They were each paid by the mile, so it became a fierce competition. Who would lay the most track the fastest? The Union Pacific started in Omaha, Nebraska, pushing westward across the Great Plains. They had it rough, I tell you. Constant Indian attacks, harsh winters, and lawless work camps where whiskey flowed like water. A lot of those tracks were laid by Irish immigrants fresh off the boats from Ireland, looking for work and a fresh start. But it was grueling work. Days spent hammering ties, clearing land, and blasting through obstacles with little more than a few dollars to show for it. Meanwhile, the Central Pacific started from Sacramento, California, heading eastbound. Their challenge was different, blasting their way through mighty Sierra Nevada mountains. They had to cut through solid granite, digging tunnels and laying tracks in near impossible conditions. They brought in thousands of Chinese laborers who proved to be some of the hardest workers they'd ever seen. The work in bitter cold on sheer cliffs, sometimes dangling from ropes while they set explosives. Many never lived to see the day of the end of the line. As the tracks got closer, both sides worked faster and faster. The Union Pacific was laying track across the open plains at a breakneck speed. Some days, they'd lay 10 miles of track in a single day. The Central Pacific, after finally breaking through the Sierra Nevadas, was rushing across the deserts of Nevada and Utah. In early 1869, the two lines were finally closing on each other on Promontory Summit, Utah. There were disputes about exactly where they would meet, but on May 10th, 1869, it was decided that was the day America would unite by steel. Now, I remember that day like it was yesterday. The sun was shining bright over Promontory Summit. Hundreds of folks gathered, railroad workers, government officials, and onlookers like myself. They were Irishmen, Chinese laborers, ex-soldiers, businessmen in fine suits, and even some Native Americans watching from a distance. It was a mix of people from all walks of life, all gathered to witness history. The two final rails were laid, and then came the moment we'd all been waiting for, the driving of that damn golden stake. It was a special spike made of pure gold, meant to symbolize the joining of the two rails. Two locomotives, the Juniper from Central Pacific and the number 119 from Union Pacific, inched towards each other until they nearly touched, their cowcatchers almost kissing. That's their swings right there in the front of the engines to make sure they could push the cattle away when going down the rails if you didn't know. Leland Stanford, one of the big railroad men from California, stepped forward with a silver hammer to drive the golden stake. But wouldn't you know it, he missed. The crowd roared with laughter. He tried again, and this time the spike was set. The final connection was made, and at that moment, a telegraph message was sent across the country. Done is all it said. All across the nation, bells rang, Cannons fired, people celebrated. The East and West were now connected. A journey that once took months can now be done in less than a week, partner. That railroad changed the face of America. It brought settlers west by the thousands, turned little frontier towns into booming cities, and opened up trade like never before. The cattle industry exploded, new towns popped up, and businesses flourished. The days of the wagon train were over. Now you could cross the country in comfort, watching the landscape roll by from the safety of a train car. But not everybody benefited. The Indian tribes who had once roamed freely across the plains saw their lands taken, their buffalo slaughtered, and their way of life disappeared. The railroad brought more soldiers, more settlers, and more destruction to their lands. It was the beginning of the end for the old ways of the West. That day in Promontory, I saw a nation forge itself together in iron, but I also saw the price that was paid. That railroad was triumphant of human will, engineering, and determination, but it also left a trail of hardship in its wake. Even now, when I hear the sounds of a train whistle in the distance, I think back to that golden moment when America was bound together by steel, and I reckon in some way we're still riding those rails today. So there you have it, the story of how the Transcontinental Railroad was built, straight from a man who stood in the dust and watched it happen. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and join me again for another tale of the Old West. Until next time, keep the spirit of the Old West alive.